Brethren, without further ado, I will now introduce Worshipful Brother Tony Harvey. For those of you who don't know, Tony has been a Freemason since 1991 and joined a scouting lodge, namely Pioneer Lodge number 9065 in Derbyshire, where he was initiated, passed and raised. In the craft, Tony was Derbyshire's first Provincial Grand Mentor from 2009 to 2013, and he's currently Head of Learning and Development in the province of West Kent. The United Grand Lodge of England appointed Tony as the 2012 Prestonian Lecturer, making him probably one of the best speakers in Freemasonry today. Tony, the floor is yours.
Well, Worshipful Master Amit, thank you very much indeed for inviting me, and for, as ever, your very, very warm welcome. Brethren, thank you for coming along for this talk. I have to tell you, there's a little bit of a history behind this talk. It was actually commissioned by Amit, who recognised a need that he thought hadn't been met before. So I'm rather hoping that he finds this talk satisfies that need, and I'm rather hoping that those of you who've come along to support him and the lodge get something of real value from it. Let me see if I can position it for you. It's really the second, or it is now anyway, the second in a series of 3 talks. The first of them is aimed at those who are not Freemasons, but who wish to know something more about us. The third is aimed at Freemasons with some experience of the craft, and it asks them to understand and plan to meet the diverse and often developing expectations of new members as they get used to our unique ways and as they progress in the craft. But this new talk, fits neatly between the above two and is aimed at new Freemasons and those waiting to join. Its purpose is to give an indication of what a new member might expect from Freemasonry in his early years and the possible routes he might take to get the most satisfaction from his members. You've already heard a little bit about my initiation up in Derbyshire, but that event, the day of it, was seared into my memory. Visually, it was disorientating. Emotionally, it was a roller coaster. My emotions ranged through anxiety, self-doubt, trepidation, curiosity, warmth, friendship, acceptance, and finally brotherhood. Now, the fact that I was initiated on Scout premises and in Scout uniform into a scouting lodge and among a large number of scouting friends only highlighted for me what was a very, very positive experience. One of the most memorable of my life. I went home on a high, and I wanted to learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could. Now, one thing was very clear to me from the start. Freemasonry has its own language. Its experienced and well-meaning members speak it with ease. They have an unconscious competence, forgetting that as an initiate, we need a translator and miss much of the nuance. So let me just try to demonstrate this. I'm asking those of you who are newer members and those of you who are not yet Freemasons to tell me, and to do this please via the chat area, what is or was your favourite piece of Masonic gobbledygook, jargon, whatever you want to call it. Just please write it in the chat area. Those words that we Freemasons use with ease, but which at first sense to you really doesn't make too much sense. Please just write them in the chat area if you would. Go on, don't be shy. Those of you who are new or recent Freemasons, those of you who aren't yet Freemasons. We've got one at least, thank you. Here they come, I knew they would. Yes, okay, so we've got charge to the initiate. It sounds like some sort of battle cry, doesn't it? Charge of the Light Brigade or something. Peculiar, yes, well, we have a particular use of that word. Cable tow, have we got any more? Let me share with you some of mine. You keep them coming, but I'll carry on. Examples include words such as passing, raising, we've got another one there, slipshod, province, grand officer. How about this, festive board, firing? That's a bit steep for those of us involved in HR. Festival, relief chest, northeast corner, jewel, and so here we go. They're all come poignard, the blindfold, absolutely right. So you've proved my point, brethren. We've got a lot of this Masonic gobbledygook. Now, for the unwary Freemason, the danger is that until we understand the jargon, we may unwittingly find ourselves drawn into committing to do something that we might rather not. So in this talk, I will indicate some of the things that you as a new Freemason might be asked to do. Now, the first thing I should explain as a bit of a foundation for what is to come is that by joining a lodge, you have joined one membership unit among many in a worldwide brotherhood. Your lodge, and this meeting is hosted by Aldwych Lodge number 3096, your lodge and all lodges are therefore part of something much, much bigger. And first of all, it is one of a number that together form a Metropolitan, Provincial or District Grand Lodge. These are regional bodies that each have their own organisation structure. And these structures replicate to some extent those in your lodge. In your case, your lodge is part of the Metropolitan Grand Lodge of London. The regional bodies themselves are part of a Grand Lodge. And each country has its own Grand Lodge, which acts as a governing body. Ours is called the United Grand Lodge of England, which just happens to be the oldest Grand Lodge in the world. Your lodge is presided over, or ruled, if we use Masonic jargon, by a master who is elected for a normally 1 year term of office. Yours is currently Worshipful Brother Amit Watts. He appoints officers to fulfill the various tasks needed to make a lodge work. Each Metropolitan, Provincial and District Grand Lodge is in itself ruled by a Metropolitan, Provincial or District Grand Master. In your case, it is Right Worshipful Brother Sir Michael Snyder. And we have with us today one of his assistants, Very Worshipful Brother Timothy Lestrange. And it's good to see you here today, Tim, as well as a number of inspectors. And we've just heard from one of those inspectors, the inspector responsible for this particular lodge. The Metropolitan Grand Master is appointed by the Grand Master at his pleasure. And that means he serves for as long as the Grand Master wishes, which will normally nowadays be up to 10 years. The Grand Master is Most Worshipful Brother, His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent. Now note how Masonic titles get grander right up to the Grand Master. They actually follow the system adopted by the Church of England. Currently, there are around, or just under, in fact, 200,000 members under the United Grand Lodge of England in just over 7,000 lodges. Now, at long last, I can describe your various routes and options open to you. The first and most important route is to progress through the 3 degrees of what is called craft masonry to become a master mason. The first degree, that of initiation, represents our entry into Freemasonry and is designed to lay out its basic framework and start you on your development. It's represented by the apron on the left-hand side in the image that you should all be seeing. The second degree, which is likely to be completed within a year of initiation, is called passing. It represents achieving a level of competence or maturity as a Freemason. And the third degree is again taken within a year of the previous one and is called raising. Actually, the degrees themselves are called Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason. That final ceremony represents mastery and includes some precepts intended to sustain you through life. Now, hopefully some other members of the lodge will progress through the degrees at the same time as you. On some occasions, you may be asked to leave the lodge meeting for a short time so that the lodge can conduct a degree that you have not yet taken. During these times, you will be accompanied by an experienced member who will give you a chance to learn more about Freemasonry based upon his experience. Now, when you take another degree, you will be asked to prove your existing qualifications and to answer some ritual questions. So please give yourself time to prepare for these and to learn the expected answers. There are other degrees in Freemasonry, the ultimate of which is called Exhortation and is conferred in a separate but connected membership unit called a Royal Arch Chapter. all craft Masons are encouraged to complete the journey they begin with initiation by being exalted as a Royal Archmason. And I would encourage you to reserve space in your diary to allow you to do so. I'll come back to this point later. The route open to all new members is to take office in the lodge. Every year, the new master appoints a team of officers. Some of these are what we call progressive officers, in that one member performs the duty of a particular office for 1 year, and the following year he progresses to the next office in a progressive sequence. This route leads eventually to the ultimate office and the highest honour that the lodge can bestow, which is that of Master of the Lodge. The progressive offices prepare him for that role, and they expose him to different aspects of our ceremonies and of the lodge. The other types of offices are continuing offices, in the sense that a member will normally occupy one such office for a few years, but hopefully not for too long. These continuing offices fall into 4 categories: administrative, led by the lodge secretary; ceremonial, led by what we call the director of ceremonies; care, led by either the lodge mentor or the lodge almoner; and membership, led by the lodge membership officer, which is a relatively new role. The route that most members take is to follow the progressive officers to become master of the lodge, and then to specialise in one of the 4 teams. As a past master of the lodge, that is literally someone who's completed at least a year as master, you might expect a few years on one team and then to move to another. We always encourage lodges to offer continuing offices to recent past masters and to refresh the team so that more members are involved and so that there can be a rich source of skills within the lodge. The first progressive office is that of steward. Now, just to explain this role, lodge meetings fall into 2 halves. That is, the lodge itself with the ceremonial work and the meal that normally follows. Stewards normally assist with some aspect of the meal. As a steward, you might serve the wine, sell raffle tickets, or look after guests, depending on the custom of your lodge. The role of steward at every level of Freemasonry is highly prized and much sought after. So much so that in provinces and districts and Metropolitan Grand Lodge and in Grand Lodge, the stewards wear distinctive red regalia. Being a lodge steward affords you an opportunity to get to know lots of people and to learn by observation, yet involvement, without too much pressure. I spent 6 years as a steward, and it gave me a very firm foundation in Freemasonry. Incidentally, you can recognise the officers of a lodge by the light blue collars they wear, each with an emblem of their office suspended from the apex. The engine room of every lodge is normally the secretary, or in some lodges it may be the director of ceremonies. A lodge can get through a year with a weak master, but will tend to thrive or fail depending on how well the secretary or director of ceremonies do their work. The secretary can be thought of as the managing director to the master's chairman. The role obviously requires a high level of management and administrative skills, as well as tact to guide others and keep everyone working together. The director of ceremonies does what it says on the tin. As well as organising the lodge ceremonial work and supporting the delivery of ritual, he has to attend to Masonic protocols and needs an authoritative presence that gains the respect of his members. Not all the work that is needed to run a lodge involves a formal office. Other routes you can take involve supporting another aspect of the lodge's activities. And typically these include ritual, financial, social, charitable, care, membership, mentoring, communication, and education. Now, by ritual, I mean, well, ritual is the name that we give to the words that we use in our ceremonies. It is the way that we communicate the very core of Freemasonry, its meaning and its unique features. Some of the progressive offices involve communicating the ritual to the candidate from memory. The amount broadly increases with each office, giving us time to get used to learning and delivering it. In addition, there are large portions of ritual which are often delegated to other members of the lodge. Therefore, one route open to you as a new Freemason is to specialize in ritual. Now, learning ritual takes time and commitment. My best advice to anyone is to start that learning as early as possible and to use daily portions of committed time to do so. By committed time, I mean when we have to do something else that nevertheless allows us to listen and possibly repeat ritual. In my early years, I recorded the ritual to play back in my daily 45-minute drive to and from work. Nowadays, I use train journeys, and I also allocate a block of 30 minutes every day to learning ritual. By spreading the learning out over a long period of time, it is possible to learn even long pieces thoroughly and to deliver it clearly. Getting used to saying ritual out loud is especially important. It helps you get used to tricky words and to pace the delivery so that it is meaningful. It's equally true for those who read ritual rather than deliver it from memory. I can always tell when someone has never heard their own voice speak the word artificer, for example. Learning and delivering ritual is one of the most rewarding routes in Freemasonry, one that keeps us connected with our purpose and our values. You will find that if you can do this well, you will always be appreciated in the lodge. Social activities are a growing part of lodge life. We have found that a range of social activities, from the informal to the formal, enhance the life of the lodge. They help members get to know each other better and are great ways of involving our families and of introducing potential new members. Some lodge tasks and activities require some knowledge and experience of Freemasonry. Organising and running social activities uses skills that many people bring with them when they join. Asking new members to use such skills helps the lodge remain fresh and active. There are a few things to bear in mind, however. First, the social activities need to be appropriate and not damaging to Freemasonry's reputation. Secondly, some of the more formal social activities may involve elements of Masonic protocol, such as involving the Master as presiding officer, welcoming and addressing guests, and proposing and responding to any formal speeches. Finally, a lodge's social program should have a range of activities to cater for the needs and interests of its whole membership. Not every activity need appeal to everyone, but when a year's program is taken as a whole, it really should offer something for everyone. And anyone running social activities will need to work with the Master, Secretary and Treasurer. Some lodges have created social committees to create an annual social program with brethren and their partners serving as members. Another very important route in Freemasonry and in a lodge is fundraising for charity. Collectively, Freemasons in this country donate over £40 million a year to charitable causes outside of Freemasonry. At most lodge meetings, there will be a collection for charity and possibly a raffle or other fundraising activity. Each lodge has a charitable fund, and from this fund, the lodge will make annual donations to local charitable causes and to our central charity, the Masonic Charitable Foundation, or MCF. Increasingly, lodges hold their charity fund in an account with the MCF. Such accounts are called relief chests. And the lodge's fundraiser-in-chief, or charity steward, may well have asked you to make a regular donations into the lodge relief chest under a gift aid arrangement. The MCF is one of our country's major grant-making charities and raises much of its money from appeals known as charity festivals. Each festival is organised by one of our 47 provinces and is essentially a 5 or 6 year appeal involving a lot of different activities. Clearly, the charitable or fundraising route holds a lot of opportunities if you are interested. The lodge charity steward always needs people to assist him with raffles and other fundraising activities. When a province is in festival, many brethren organise sponsored activities, auctions and social events with a fundraising purpose. Provinces also have their own charities and need brethren who can support their work, whether as fundraisers or as trustees. And of course, the MCF itself needs volunteers, including a board of directors and members of subcommittees. Closely allied to the charitable route is that of care. Freemasonry has members of all backgrounds, all walks of life, and all ages. Most of them also have families. At some point in their lives, many members find themselves in some form of distress, whether that be as a result of an enforced change of circumstances, a deterioration in mental or physical health, or simply advancing years. One thing we all know is that our brethren and Freemasonry itself is here to help us when we are in need. Every lodge has an officer called an almoner, whose role it is to respond to those needs and to ensure that they are met. Almoners are supported by colleagues at provincial level and have direct lines into the Masonic Charitable Foundation, which can provide financial and other support for Freemasons and their families, ranging through living expenses, education, medical, and care needs. All of these roles require a great deal of patience, tact, diplomacy, and the ability to develop supportive relationships with members and treat their private matters in confidence. If you do have these skills and qualities, the care route would offer you a lot of personal satisfaction, and your efforts would be highly regarded by others. Relatively new routes in Masonic terms are in membership development and mentoring. These offer opportunities to make a real difference to the health and strength of your lodge and to Freemasonry as a whole. Membership development is about facilitating the future development of the lodge to ensure it's attractive to potential members and helping other members to introduce new ones. Mentoring is about providing individual guidance to new members that meets their personal needs for information, personal contact, and encouraging support. Unfortunately, some of our more traditional brethren think that mentoring is only concerned with instructing new members. However, the one-size-fits-all or conveyor belt approach that this implies is on the way out as Freemasonry becomes more member-centric. Membership development and mentoring take place around a framework and toolkit called the Members Pathway. This offers good practice guidance that follows the journey of a man from being outside of Freemasonry all the way through to becoming a committed Master Mason. Leading a lodge's membership development or mentoring activities clearly requires some experience of Freemasonry, but if you have the appropriate skills and qualities, it's an area that you might aspire to and which you can support from early on. Another opportunity to innovate comes in the area of communication. Increasingly, lodges are using social media to communicate between members and to their communities and beyond. Lodges are also beginning to adopt more sophisticated communication systems for bulk email, video conferencing, surveys, bookings and payments, websites, and fundraising. If you have talents in this area, you will always have a contribution to make. Again, you would need to work with existing members and especially the lodge secretary to develop policies and practices that are appropriate to the lodge and to Freemasonry. There is a lot of support for this, for the use of new communication techniques from Metropolitan, Provincial Grand Lodges and United Grand Lodge of England. Masonic research and education are great routes for anyone interested in increasing understanding of Freemasonry and communicating it to others. These are wide roads to travel as they have so many different facets. Just a few of these are local and national Masonic history, our protocols and etiquette, interpreting our symbols, our ceremonies and ritual, our different orders, and developing and sharing the skills needed by lodge officers. There exist specialist lodges and publications for Masonic researchers, and the world of Masonic education has been boosted by the introduction of Solomon, which is United Grand Lodge's online repository of high quality and credible Masonic learning material. Freemasonry needs researchers, writers, and speakers who can draw on this mass of material and contribute to its expansion, as well as curators, librarians, and others who are able to staff our Masonic libraries and museums. If you bring these skills with you into Freemasonry, you will find a whole new world opens up. If you develop them as a result of your membership, you will earn the respect of many outside of Freemasonry, as Freemasonry is increasingly seen as a rich field for further study. Taking tentative steps beyond your own lodge, one of the great joys of Freemasonry is visiting others. Visiting extends our network of Masonic friends. It increases the sense of fellowship and exposes us to variation in lodge practices and ritual. It also allows us to learn by observation rather than by participation, which for some can be just as useful and brings no pressure to perform. Visiting is not a specialism route as such, but it does require commitment in time and cost. I should mention that one visitor is usually asked to respond to a special toast that a member of the host lodge will propose to all of its visitors. So the wise visitor makes a mental note of one or two aspects of the meeting, which he can then refer to in case he is asked to respond at short notice. On more than a good number of occasions, I've been asked to respond to this toast with no notice at all, although I would not expect a new Freemason to be put in this position. Now, while some lodges meet in public venues, many meet in Masonic halls owned and run by members. Such halls are normally constituted as limited companies and therefore require volunteers to get involved in governance, marketing, commercial activities, catering, risk assessments and safety, building development and maintenance. In many cases, lodges are asked to appoint a representative onto a Masonic Hall committee. If you are interested, this can be a rewarding route to follow. Beyond the lodge and its Masonic Hall, there are other Masonic organisations. The first of these is your Metropolitan, Provincial or District Grand Lodge. And then, of course, there is Grand Lodge. These have officers in broadly similar roles to lodges, although most offices are only held for 1 year and are not progressive. However, some of the more senior roles require officers to continue in post for a number of years. A first appointment to Metropolitan, Provincial or District office or to past rank normally comes a few years after you've served as master of your lodge. Further promotion will depend on merit, ability and availability. Appointment as a Grand Officer is limited to very few senior officers each year, and further promotion is very rare indeed. All of these appointments are to be considered as Masonic honours, as rewards for good service. So while we may hope to be so recognised, none of us have a right to expect preferment. Doing so, or even asking for an appointment or promotion, is considered to be a rude breach of Masonic etiquette and is likely to set you back by a number of years. Now, I've left to last a very enjoyable route that around half of all Freemasons follow, and that is to join one or more other Masonic order in addition to the craft. Craft Freemasonry, as practiced in craft lodges such as Aldwych, offers the 3 core degrees. Royal Arch Masonry is a separate order or Masonic organisation that is very closely allied to the craft. It completes the journey we started with initiation. So if craft offers a basic course in Freemasonry, the Royal Arch offers the advanced. Beyond these, there are many other Masonic orders which are run as separate organisations, each of which have their own lodges, provinces and grand lodges. And all of them require members to be and to remain as members of a craft lodge. So we can think of them as extensions to core Freemasonry, and as such they have much to interest and challenge us. Whatever other orders you might choose to join, there is a basic tenet that I ask you always to remember. Whatever else you do in Freemasonry, always put your original or mother craft lodge first. You and your successors have a stake in its health and strength, and without the craft, everything else will flounder. Now, personally, I've followed a number of these routes. Some, but not all at the same time, or in the same lodge, or not even in the same province. I have found that one route often leads to another. Within my lodges, I've served as both secretary and charity steward, and I've gone on to be a Provincial Grand Secretary and a Director of the Masonic Charitable Foundation. I've enjoyed learning and delivering ritual, have been master of quite a number of lodges, and I'm often called upon to deliver one of my party pieces of ritual. I was one of the first Provincial Grand Mentors, and I developed the Members' Pathway for United Grand Lodge, which introduced the role of Membership Officer. I've been a Provincial Communication Officer, and I'm a high volume user of Masonic social media. I've worked extensively in Masonic education and research, served for a year on United Grand Lodge's Learning and Development Group, and have held a number of Masonic lectureships. I'm a member in a number of provinces, have visited and delivered talks in every province in England and Wales, and in a number of our districts overseas. And I've also joined a number of other orders, although I cut back on these when my Provincial and Grand Lodge activities grew. Today, I remain a member of the Craft, Royal Arch, Mark, and 4 other orders. But there are 2 Masonic routes I have not followed. One is care. And it's not that I don't care. On a personal level, I hope I practice care to my brethren and others. However, I lack the patience to be an effective almoner. The other is the management of Masonic halls, largely because very early on I found myself actively involved in province-wide duties, and I felt that a role in a specific Masonic hall might create a conflict of interest. Now, I explain all of this only to demonstrate, brethren, that a Masonic journey can have breadth as well as depth. My own journey through a number of routes illustrates that anyone with a developed sense or set of skills and qualities can find one or more routes to follow in Freemasonry, and that by following these routes, Freemasonry helps us to develop our skills even further. It's a virtuous circle. However, I do want to sound a note of caution. There is a trapdoor that many of us fall through in our enthusiasm for Freemasonry, and I've been guilty of this more than once in the last 30 years. I call it Masonic Indigestion. Freemasonry can absorb us to such an extent that we end up taking on more commitments than we should. At some point, you may find a need to reduce those commitments, whether it's due to a change in circumstances, a concern expressed by family members, or even by a new opportunity offered to you. Therefore, it's always a good idea to hold some time and money in reserve to avoid overcommitting. If your passion for Freemasonry develops to such an extent that you want to dip into this reserve, you can always do so by visiting more lodges. That route is always open, and it requires no long-term commitment. Another piece of advice I would offer is don't hold on to a continuing office for too long. None of us have a right to such offices, and if we occupy any office for too long, we will deprive other brethren from learning from and enjoying the opportunities that the office offers. It also means your lodge will have fewer people in its pool of skills, which is never good for any lodge. Finally, if you find others in your lodge do not offer or support your chosen route, please talk to them at an early stage. Freemasons have the best of intentions, but some of us get blinded by other considerations and we lose sight of what every member is seeking. Explain to your personal mentor and the lodge secretary what it is that you want to do, why it appeals, and what you think you can offer. Try to reach an agreement that satisfies you as well as meeting the needs of your lodge. So to conclude, brethren, there are many routes you can follow as a Freemason. These offer rich opportunities for personal development and to make a contribution to the greater good. They draw upon existing skills and they offer a framework in which to develop new ones. In this talk, I've attempted to outline the key routes and to share some of what I have learned by following a number of them. We often talk about a Masonic journey. I only hope and trust that your Masonic journey, with its various twists, turns and reroutes, will be as enjoyable, satisfying and rewarding as mine has been. And with that, worshipful master and brethren, I'm now very happy to receive your questions. So if I can hand back to you, please, Amit.
Tony, thank you.
Looking forward to hearing.
Fascinating talk, really well put together. Thank you.